Okay, Mrs. Green here again, and today we're going to do the first two operations for decimals, which are adding and subtracting. Usually add and subtract go together and multiply and divide go together. You might have noticed that pattern because they are opposite operations. They undo each other. So you can add and subtract one number and get 0. There's a additive property that tells you can do that. Opposites, they're related. And we'll talk about more of that when we get to solving equations, where we'll use addition and subtraction to solve equations together. So the key information when you're adding and subtracting decimals is to use a vertical format. Vertical format, so you're going to write them. You can see my little graphics over here are writing the numbers above each other. That's a vertical. So vertical is up and down. Horizontal is going across like the horizon. We use those terms a lot in math. Vertical format to add and subtract decimals. And the important thing to remember when you're using a vertical format, with addition and subtraction anyway, it's not true with multiplication and division, but with addition and subtraction you want to line up the decimal point. And then you're going to use your rules of integers to add and subtract. We don't have to memorize a bunch of new rules for adding and subtracting decimals. They're the same rules as that apply for integers and for fractions. Except we don't need to deal with a common denominator. We just have to line everything up. All right. So in example 1, we've got 3 numbers to add up: 2.4, 0.86, and 6. I'm going to rewrite them vertically, so we're going to use the vertical method. And I'm going to line up the decimal, 2.4, and right underneath, I'm going to start with the decimal so I get it lined up correctly. 0.86. And then 6, which if it's just a whole number like 6, the decimal is right behind it. So I'm going to include the decimal. Now I'm going to fill in some placeholders with zeros, which I'm allowed to do, just that we know everything's lined up. Now I have addition. These all had addition in between them. So I'm adding straight down, just like I would if I didn't have those decimals in there. But I need to make sure that in my answer I have a decimal place. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the decimal down first, just so I'm a little safer that way. And 0 plus 0 plus 6 is 6. 4 plus 8 is 12. I have to carry the 1, and I get 9. So 9.26, pretty straightforward. Vertical, we're using the vertical method. Example 2, we are subtracting. So here's this one. First one was adding. Example 2 is subtracting, so we have to line up vertically, but we need to check our integer rules. So I'm going to change subtraction to addition and change the sign of the second number to its opposite. And I can see already that -3 and 11, that they're different signs, so I need to use subtraction. And whenever you're subtracting, you have to subtract the smaller number from the bigger number. And when we had comparison of decimals in the last lesson, I could compare the place values, so I know that 11 is bigger than 3, so I'm going to subtract. I'm going to put the 11 on top, and then I'm going to subtract the 3, and I'm lining up the decimal. I don't have to add any zeros because they have the same number of place values. Oh, I did add a 0, this 0, after the 8. I automatically did that without even thinking. Okay, now I'm just using subtraction, and I have to borrow and change some of my numbers. So this is just a review. This should look familiar. Oh, I didn't need to borrow a 1 there. So this is 0, 10. So 7.26. Oh, that's not right. Let's see what I did wrong here. I'm going to go back. If you caught what I did wrong and fixed it while you were doing the problem, excellent. Well, I'm going to try to do it right this time. So I'm borrowing 1 from the 8. And that gives me 4, 10 subtract 4 is 6. And then the 8 changes to a 7. Oh yeah, I didn't have to borrow anything from the 11, I see now. So 8.26. Good thing I checked my answer. And it's not a negative number because if I look at my original problem, even though they had different signs, the sign of my bigger number was a positive, so this is also a positive, 8.26. All right, so I'm going to talk right now about checking your answer. So we're going to start discussing checking for reasonableness. We talked a little bit about this in class. We've talked about how you can make sense of your answer. One way to do that is through estimation. So I'm going to look at my original problem for example 1, and I see that I had a 2 and I had the second number which rounds up to a 1 because it was a 0.86, and then I had a 6, so that's 6, 7, 8, 9, and then I had a little extra with the 40, so that seems reasonable to me. My second example problem, I can add my result and my smaller number that I was subtracting and see if I get my original number. So 6 plus 4 is 0, 5 plus, and carry the 1, 5, 8, 11. Okay, so that works. So you want to start getting in the habit of checking your answers. Example 3 has two negatives, and we're adding. So again, we're adding decimals, but now we're adding negative decimals. Same rules apply as with integers, and we're going to add them by using the vertical method. So we've got 2.9 and 6.5. And I know my result is going to be a negative because I've got the same sign. I have to take the common sign. So let's add these down. 14, 9.4. And I know it's a negative 9.4 because I have to take the common sign whenever I'm adding numbers with the same sign. So it's the same rules with integers. Decimals with the same sign, you add them together and you take the common sign. Example 4, we have quite a few examples because there are so many ways you can do this. You're adding, you're subtracting, you've got negative and positive situations, so I've got to cover all those different scenarios. The problems aren't hard, but we have more examples than usual. So I've got, I'm subtracting, and I've got the same sign, a negative decimal and another negative decimal. Now, as with integers, I'm going to change subtraction to addition, and change the sign of the next number to its opposite. So now I've got a problem where I've got two numbers just like integers, but they're decimals, but they have different signs. So I have to use subtraction. I have to use subtraction as my operation to find the difference, and then I'm going to go back to the original problem and see which what the sign of the bigger number is, and I'll discover that the bigger number is the 42, and it's got a positive. So I'm expecting a positive result. But I'm going to use subtraction, and whenever I subtract, I have to subtract the smaller number from the bigger number. So the bigger number here is 42, the smaller is 25. So I'm going to rewrite this vertically. 42.734 is my bigger number. Subtract my smaller number. Fill in with zeros wherever I need to. Line up my decimals. So my answer is going to have a decimal. How about a blue answer? There we go. And I'm subtracting. I'm using subtraction. Remember, I'm using subtraction. 0 from 4 is 4. I'm going to borrow there. That's a 5. That's a 6. That's a 3. Borrowing. And then I have to look at my original problem. And again, this is positive 42, so this remains a positive 17.354. Okay, so there's a fourth example, and it has a little bit of key information, but you can write this key information just as part of the example. And because it's a definition of a term we haven't been introduced to, and your book talks about it, in the blue book, doesn't talk about it in the red book so much. It doesn't give it this term, but I think it's a good thing to cover. It's called front-end estimation. And so you've heard the term estimation, of course. So this is just a different, a specific kind of estimation. So here's an example problem. All right, so front-end estimation. Here's an example. I think the best way to explain this is through an example. So they give you a little chart here, and they're putting on a play, and these are some props. And they want to know, they have $50. People have $50. Your budget, basically, is $50. And so the question isn't how much do these add up to, how much change would you get? It's not a precise question. The question is are your props going to cost more or less than $50? So since it's not asking you for a precise number, you can use some estimation here. So the front end part of it means you're going to concentrate first on all the numbers in front of the decimal, and you're just going to add those up. So you've got 18, 9, 3, and 16. So you're just going to pull those off, ignore the decimal for now, add them up because it's pretty fast to do this. So we get 11, 26, 46. And now you're going to add in those other parts. And you're going to determine whether they're closer to $1 or closer to 0. So that's why it's kind of a fast way to do it. So we've got 95 cents, which is closer to $1, 49 cents, which is closer to 0, 49 also closer to 0, and another 05 closer to 0. Now you might notice that 49 and 49 are both close to 50. So if you were a little worried about being close and your estimation being off, you could change one of these to a 1 because you really had two halves in there. So you would either end up with 2 or 1. You'd add that to the 46. And so your total estimate after you're taking into account the front part, and then secondly we took into account the back part, the back decimal parts, that's this, you're going to get 48. So $48, which is less than 50. So you're pretty safe on your budget. So front-end estimation is basically taking off the whole numbers that are in front of the decimal and then estimating whether the back numbers are close to 1, 0, or if you're really close, if you have a lot of 49 cents, you're going to want to count those, and those are close to 1/2, and you're going to want to, for every 2 of them, you'd have $1. So it's kind of like money you're estimating. Okay, so you've got several practice problems. This is because we have 2 operations. We have addition and subtraction, and we have 2 kinds of decimals. We have positive and negative, and we started some front-end estimations. We've got 5 practice problems. 30.193 plus 7.91. Number 2, negative 6.08 plus 2.661. Number 3, 6.8 plus negative 1.812. And number 4, 1.57 subtract 9.28. And then number 5, I want you to use front-end estimation. So I know you could line these up and add them, but I want you to practice front-end estimation. And remember that's dealing with the front of the decimal, adding those up, and then estimating the right-hand side of the decimal, whether it's closer to 1, 1/2, or 0, and estimating what the sum would be. So I don't want a precise number on number 5. And then you're going to do your wrap-up, and that's it.